What's going on, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, I want to talk a little bit about the history of dynasties in the CFL, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers with the chance to win their third Grey Cup in 4 seasons. I think this is a good time to talk about it. Who have been dynasties in the past in the CFL? Who has went back-to-back in terms of winning Grey Cup championships? Let's take a look at it today. But before we get into today's video, I just wanted to say that I'll be the first to admit that I'm not the most familiar with the early history of the CFL. So when we talk about the late 1950s, the 1960s, stuff like that, in that era, I'm not the most familiar, but I'm always looking to learn more about the history and the early history of the CFL. So if you guys have any resources down below, be sure to let me know in the comments section. And I also wanted to say an interesting fact is that Zach Collaros is going to be the first quarterback to start in 4 consecutive Grey Cups, which is kind of remarkable history. But with that said, let's get into the video. So the first thing you have to talk about when you talk about dynasties in any sport is your definition of one. And I think in general, the consensus is 3 championships within a 5-year period or 4-year period, depending on your definition of it, because I think that really demonstrates a dominance over a small period of time, and you have a relatively same core of those teams winning those championships. So I would say that 3 championships in a 5-year period is what I would define as a dynasty in the CFL. And on the board here, I have the teams that have won 3 Grey Cups in a 5-year period. On the other side of the board, I have teams that have won back-to-back Grey Cups, but I also only decided to do it since 1958, which is known as when the CFL officially became known as the CFL and kind of ushered in its modern era. So with that being said, these are the teams that have won 3 Grey Cups in a 5-year period, and we're going to skip Winnipeg because we'll go back to talk about them at the end. So in terms of the Edmonton Eskimos in 1978 through 1982, they won 5 straight championships with Warren Moon and Tom Wilkinson as their quarterbacks. This is the team that everybody talks about when they talk about the great teams of all time in the CFL. 5 straight championships is really the benchmark for that. So I don't think that's ever going to be done again, personally, but no team's even won 3 in a 5-year period since the Eskimos did that in the 1980s and late 1970s. Now, before that, you have to go back to the Hamilton Tiger Cats between 1963 and 1967. They won 3 Grey Cups in a 5-year span then, with Angelo Mosca, all those great players that they had back then for the Ticats, kind of the Ticats' golden age. They won the Grey Cup in 1963, 1965, and 1967. And then before that, you have to go back to Winnipeg in 1958 through 1962, where they won 4 Grey Cups in a 5-year period. So those are the only 3 teams in the modern era of the CFL that have won 3 championships within a 5-year period, which is very remarkable considering that the league only has 9 teams. Winnipeg, of course, had a chance to win 3 in a row last year, but fell short to the Toronto Argonauts. So they still have a chance to become that dynasty by my definition here. With 3 Grey Cups in 4 seasons, they'll have a chance next year, even if they lose in this year's game, to become that CFL dynasty, the first one since Edmonton in the 1980s and late 1970s. But it's very rare in the CFL, as you can see, to win 3 Grey Cups in 5 years. Now, how about the teams that have went back-to-back in terms of winning Grey Cups? The first one and most recent example is Winnipeg in 2019 and 2021. And I know those aren't back-to-back years, but of course we had the canceled 2020 season in between. And Winnipeg, their first championship in 2019 came out of nowhere, really. They were the 3rd place team in the West that year. They had just acquired Zach Collaros with a couple games left in the regular season, and then they got red hot, beat Calgary on the road, beat Saskatchewan on the road, and upset the Ticats pretty easily in the Grey Cup to claim their first championship in quite some time. And then in 2021, after the canceled 2020 season, 2021 shortened season, they kind of run roughshod over the league. They win the Grey Cup again against Hamilton, this time in Hamilton, to win back-to-back. Now, before Winnipeg in 2019 and 2021, the most recent team to go back-to-back in terms of winning Grey Cups was the Montreal Alouettes in 2009 and 2010, winning both times against the Saskatchewan Roughriders with Anthony Calvillo. And the thing with those two teams that won it for the Alouettes was that before they won those two cups, they were kind of seen as a disappointing playoff team within that era. They made a bunch of appearances in the big game and just kept on losing. They won one in 2002, but then they had several Grey Cup losses leading up to 2009, and ultimately they got it done winning back-to-back, and Anthony Calvillo finishing his career with 3 Grey Cup rings. And then before Montreal, you have to go all the way back to 1996 and 1997 Toronto Argonauts that were truly great teams, back-to-back 15-3 teams with Doug Flutie, a lot of talent on those squads, and ultimately the Argos win back-to-back Grey Cups in the 1990s, 2 of the greatest Argos teams to ever exist, and honestly, with the Argos team of this year that finished 16-2 and lost in the East Final, can't really put this year's Toronto team in the same breath anymore as those teams in the 90s that won it for the Argos. Then, before the Argos did it in the 1990s, Edmonton won 5 in a row from 1978 till 1982, like I said over here. Like I said, one of the most dominant CFL teams of all time, kind of the benchmark when you talk about dominant teams in the CFL, and 5 championships in a row. I don't know if that's ever going to be happening again in the CFL, especially with how players seem to move around a lot more nowadays with free agency and the NFL and all these other leagues that pry players away. And then before the Edmonton Eskimos dynasty of the late 1970s and early 1980s, you had the Ottawa Roughriders winning back-to-back championships with Russ Jackson at quarterback, 1968 and 1969. I mean, this was really the golden age of Ottawa Roughriders football, and they've never really returned to that era ever since they've had, these couple other iterations of their team in Ottawa with the Red Blacks and the Renegades. So at the end of the day, that was kind of the golden age of Red Blacks football. And then before them, you had the Winnipeg Blue Bombers going back-to-back in 1961 and 1962, and then also again in 1958 and 1959. So Winnipeg does it back-to-back within a 5-year period. So they went 4 in a 5-year period, but also went back-to-back twice, which is remarkable, honestly, when you look at it. And then you look at that Hamilton team, they won 3 in a 5-year period, but did not go back-to-back in any of those years, winning it in 1963, 65, and 67. So it really just goes to show you how difficult it is to win in the CFL and win consistently and be a dominant team that wins championships. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a very difficult task for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to win on Sunday against the Montreal Alouettes. They'll be heavily favored like they were last year around this time, but history is working against them in terms of being one of these select teams to win 3 championships in 5 years. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. You'll have to let me know in the comment section whether or not Winnipeg gets it done this year, or do they get it done next year, become one of those teams that wins 3 championships in 5 years. But with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, be sure to hit like and subscribe. I really appreciate the support. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.